This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Yeah, the country is rich in diamond, gold, and uranium. Talk about uranium, think Middle East. What uranium is doing with regard to production of the same. But let's go to the proverb. If you think you have someone eating out of your hands, it's a good idea to count your fingers. Prof, how would you interpret it?
If you think somebody is eating out of your hands,
it's a good idea to count your fingers.
Because if you know, if you count your fingers and find out whether they are many or not, whether they are injured or not, then you can always you can always fight him back. But if you have a finger that is missing or that is disabled, then fighting back is a problem. That's the way I see it.
I love it.
Bilokera, how would you interpret it?
That's tough, but is it about trust? Something to do with trust, the way I see it. You know, the Arabs have got something similar, that if you are greeting someone you don't trust, count your fingers. But they're still there. But I don't know, maybe it's something about if you know the person you don't trust. You let him have your resources or your whatever, then you have to check whether you have anything left.
Yeah,
Indeed. You must.
Indeed.
Auditing Kenya's national debt is what we're looking at today. Transparency, priorities, and the 10-point agenda. Of course, this is one of them that was on the 10-point agenda. And, you know, there's a lot of sour taste in the mouths of many people when it comes to the 10-point agenda, because it was supposed to be something that was uniting the country, but looks like something that was just a political smokescreen for other things. One of the things which shouldn't be toyed with is reducing national debt. That is one of the points on the agenda. Might be of interest to us that as of today, Kenya's national debt, public debt, is also called its total public and publicly guaranteed debt, stands at 12 trillion shillings. And that's as of 2025. It translates to 67% of Kenya's GDP. Essentially, what we're saying is that for every 100 shillings that you have, 67 of those shillings is going towards debts, or should. It's been rising steadily, with domestic borrowing now making up the largest share of the total debt stock. Domestic debt stands at 6.6 trillion shillings. External debt stands at 5.4 trillion shillings, and that's about 45% of the total. We have not seen that the appetite for, incurring debt has reduced. We still see that there have been more loans that have been taken out, more agreements that have come in, whether it be from Kenya's financial partners or whether it be from domestic borrowing. We'll start with you, Bilokero. We had been told that reducing debt is going to be an agenda. If anything, we've seen that it's gone in the opposite direction. Does that make sense to you, that the debt that's being taken in the country at the moment is going towards things for which it ought to? Remembering, constitutionally, what debt is supposed to do for Kenya.
It's always been the case with every government. I remember when Kibaki came in NAC, one of the pledges is that we are going to rationalize government expenditure, and so reduce debt. But even at that time, when the economy, many people think the economy was better than what it is, still we had to borrow. And it reached a point where I remember, because I was the chairman of the parliamentary network on World Bank, World Bank and IMF kept on giving conditions if you want to borrow, which included like the freeze on recruitment of teachers and nurses. So every government's pledge is to do so, but I think when you look at the society itself, the Kenyan society and the political landscape, there's always an appetite for development, in this country. This is a developing country, so that in everywhere you go, if you're a leader, there's a demand for a road, there's a demand for this facility, that facility, and so even when you can see clearly this government is spending 67 shillings out of every 100, and the remaining is not enough to even pay the salaries of the public servants, but we still want those things done. And there's no time Kenyans would say, no, thank you, I think the situation is bad. Let us not ask for these things. But the wish list is so long that it would be really wrong to expect these guys to change course and say, no, we're not going to borrow. But there are alternatives that can always be used by governments to address some of the challenges of development. You can't live, even as an individual, you cannot live beyond your means. If you find you don't have capacity, you can do other things to try and stay alive. And I think this is where it requires leadership some time to rethink some of our priorities. Because some of the things that we do is because of a lack of priorities. Some of them is because there's a huge wastage, inefficiencies, and misappropriation, mismanagement, and all that, where you can save huge amounts of money. That would really take care of some of the needs that are. So if we don't deal with some of those issues, then you get into a situation where then you're tempted. Because the people who are lending are with you. Every day they're in your office. World Bank will be calling every day in the treasury. IMF will be calling all of them. Everybody wants to lend to you. It's just like a normal banks, by the way. The way normal banks will come to you and say, why don't you take a loan? We get it nowadays on our SMS. You get texts from banks telling you, this is the offer. So it's the same thing with those guys. So if you're not then very firm on your policies, you'll be tempted to borrow. And this seems to be what is happening.
Prof, we look at where the economy is today. We look at the debt question the country is dealing with. And the government says we are doing everything to pay up, right? We can't afford to not pay this because we know the repercussions that will have to the country. But while we are doing that, one asks the question, how do we prioritize paying debt when there is wastage at the same time? There is graft and corruption that goes unchecked. Are we able to operate on the same level and say that you're headed anywhere?
Let me first, thank you very much for the question. Let me first react to my colleague's very incisive observation on debt before I respond. Every government seems to promise we shall rationalize the debt, but they don't do it because it's very easy to kick the can down the path or down the road. And it's very easy because debt is always an easy option. So if I borrow money from any of you, just get into your pocket and get it to me. So it's an easier option compared with tax. Because if you tax people, they feel it immediately. But debt can be paid by future generations. So governments are always tempted to go to debt instead of borrowing money or instead of getting money from tax. It's also very hard to reduce the costs. My friend said that one of the ways to rationalize debt is to make sure that you reduce your expenditure, whether it is on social services, whether it is on roads, highways, and so on. But the political implications are very high. So if you start telling people you're not going to build a road for you, and 2027 is coming next year, you're not going to build an airport for you, and 2027 is not coming next year, it's very hard. So what makes debt very hard to manage is because of the political implications. And you need to be very bold to reduce the expenditure. You need to be very bold to tell people we are going to tax you instead of borrowing so that we take less debt. President Ruto tried that and you know what happened. But back to your question. I think what we need is political will so that when we say we are going to do something, we do it. So you cannot tell us you are going to tax us more, you are going to borrow more, but we see waste all the time. For example, people have been complaining about delegations going to State House and going elsewhere, and that is money used. People traveling all over the country to inspect projects and so on, that is money used. So unless there is political will and people are able to stamp their foot down and say, we are going to reduce the debts. And very important, we agree that we can suffer today because tomorrow can be better. But unfortunately, politicians don't think in the wrong line. They think about today. And that's why I agree with my colleague that we need to change the way we look at issues. We need to be bold enough, and we need to look at the Kenyans in the eyes and tell them that we might suffer today, but tomorrow will be tomorrow. But not many politicians will be able to do that. Maybe the next generation of politicians.
Senator, Prof is talking about goodwill, and he's talking about boldness. And one of those bold steps that we had hoped again that the NADCO process would help Kenyans achieve is the recommendation to be able to declare to have a declaration on public debt audit. So undertaking an audit process so that we're able to underscore value for money mechanisms, we're able to look at comprehensive transparency in the audit process, looking at issues around sustainability, even in our borrowing. And beyond that, there were concerns around publishing of the loan agreements, because these debts are taken from somewhere to do certain things, and most of them are mega programs. And where you sit, why do you think there is no goodwill to just have an audit and to also declare? This morning we've been talking about the Adani deal, for example, for the JKI, and against the High Court's recommendations on public participation and having these documents out there, the government seemingly is not willing and ready. Why do you think this would be happening?
Is that question for me or for my
It's for the senator.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is. It would be. I think it would be far-fetched to imagine that that the government, this government or any government, would be willing to do an audit of the public debt for one simple reason. They know that the loans have not been borrowed and spent in accordance with the Public Financial Management Act. Because the law is very clear that, for example, when you borrow, you must spend on development. We know that, for a long time now, we've been borrowing money to basically have budget support, which means the money is being used also for recurrent expenditures and so forth. Clearly, from what we have discussed earlier, if what is left is only 33%, that would hardly cover the recurrent expenditure. So this is why you remember all the way from Eurobond, and the government has been stonewalling on that issue of the audit for a long time. And so when it's not going to be, because clearly there will be a breach of the law if an audit is done, that we're not spending money. That's one. Two, there's also a breach of the law in the manner in which we borrowed. It may not be in accordance with the law. Sometimes the necessary approvals and whatever. You remember the Anglo leasing?
Yeah.
18 projects. They were all finance and supply and finance contracts. And the same financier is the same one who is a contractor. And so they set their own terms. So I think because of the many things that have been hidden for a long time, by the way, it's not something anytime recent, but when you look at some of those debts that were taken, some of them are taken even for private sector. You mentioned guarantees. Yes, there are sovereign guarantees that have been made for individuals to have their own whatever, in 30, 40 years now, and it's there, it's in the books. So when you audit, a lot of things will come to light. But I think for the moment, the reason why anyone who comes in does not want an audit would clearly be then you will not be able to meet that thresholds for borrowing in accordance with the PFM Act. I think that would be the reason.
And Prof is itching to make an addition.
Yes. In 1991, you can do the number of years since then. Somebody borrowed me 2,500, and he has never paid up to this day.
Did you say 1995?
1991.
Oh, okay.
He was my high school classmate, and we were in campus together, but he has never paid up to this day, and I can remember. So if I can remember 2,500, why would it be an issue for the government not to tell us how much debt they have taken? It's the easiest thing to do, because all those records are public, and very important is our money. So I agree with you that we need these debt agreements to be made public, because that's our money. We are the people who are going to pay that money back. But you can be sure that, as my colleague put it, there are so many hidden skeletons. And I'm sure even the next government will not tell us all these details. So that's the boldness I'm talking about. Because we know how much debt we have, who took it, and how it was taken, and what it was for. Then we can now start cleaning the books. But as long as there's secrecy, then that will always be a milestone on our necks. In fact, for all the times I've come to Spice FM, maybe I can say 95% of the discussions always touch on debt. Even today, I could predict there will be something. But before I stop, there's something else that all of us have refused to focus on. Maybe not deliberately. Somebody said that most of our debt now is ROCO debt.
Yes.
So, and that to me is a big concern. Because when the government starts getting credit from the banks and so on, and not you and me, then we start crowding the economy. So even the debt is always a problem. And when we talk about debt, I'm always getting annoyed because we don't talk about the local debt. A lot of suppliers, a lot of contractors are owed money by the government,
Pending bills.
including maybe some of you who are here. So I want the concept, the debate on debt to be more encompassing, not just about the foreign debt, but local debt, which is actually as important, and which would probably have a better stimulative effect on the economy as compared with the foreign debt.
You see, the reason why the contracts or the terms of the loans sometimes are not being shared is because they may not be, like I said, in line with the requirements of the law. This is why you remember when President Uhuru in Mombasa had that meeting with the media and he promised he's going to get the SGR thing. He's going to share, but to date, some of those
He
details
even
you will
sounded
not get.
surprised. You did not publish? You didn't?
They know. I mean,
Even
so,
the new government said they would be made public.
yes, it's not going to be because of the way some of these things are taken. I think you might think this government is government and things are done transparently and whatever, but some of the people who lend, by the way, themselves are not straight. Oh, no. Some of the institutions that give money, the people who run them themselves have an interest. So these things are done in such a way that, they don't want. By the way, let me tell you, one of the things I have learned when I was in Parliament, the chairman of Parliamentary Network in World Bank, is that these institutions that lend, including these multilateral ones like World Bank and IMF, don't want these facilities or loans to be approved by Parliament in the first place. They like dealing directly with the government. The question of dealing with Parliament and getting these things, they think that's not their responsibility. They don't want to hear about that. So it's one of the things that I think makes it easy. That's why probably the government always likes bringing these things after the fact, when they have already borrowed. Then it's just sent to Parliament for ratification. Although it's clear that they must really get approval. But it's because some of these institutions themselves don't like that transparency, that accountability. They want to deal with governments. They'll tell you it's not, the issue of Parliament is they want to operate like a bank. What happens out there is, it's like a family. If the father is borrowing, they're not interested in knowing the bank, what the rest of the family thinks about you. So that's the challenge that I think I have seen in some of the institutions.
Okay. We talk about domestic debt, Prof, being an issue. If we're looking at the percentage of debt, if we're looking at the amount of debt at 12 trillion, over 50% of that is domestic debt. And sometimes when we hear these numbers, we hear these comparisons, it's difficult for us to understand exactly what's going on. Now, when you have domestic debt, obviously what that means is that you've borrowed from local institutions as government, and that these institutions are able to guarantee their business because, quote unquote, government will never fail. Right? The government will not go into a place where it can be called a bad debt. So it's good money for these local institutions.
And easy money also.
And easy money for them as well. But what does that really do to the economy when supposedly private funds that could be used to fund entrepreneurs and this section of the country, which essentially would be responsible for building the economy, is then precluded from accessing this funding? What does that do for us to understand?
That's my biggest concern, because I've said in this studio many times that if you gave me 1 million shillings and you give the same money to the government and you give them 5 years, maybe the 1 million might still be 1 million in the government, but in the private hands it could be maybe 10 million. So money is always more efficiently used in the private hands than in the public hands, for obvious reasons. You have to negotiate, you have to come up with priorities. So money is not always allocated efficiently in the public sector, but in the private sector is allocated very efficiently. And that's my biggest worry, because when the government takes more money than the private sector, then you slow down the economic growth. The money does not circulate or multiply as fast as it should. And one of the areas where we lose is in tax, because if the economy is growing faster, then you have more taxes, whether it is VAT or whichever tax, you get more taxes. So I wish in the long run, we are going to have more money going to the private sector, not the public sector. And again, that takes us back to the original question. If the government is not going to get money from the local institutions. Where should it get it from? Maybe we can go to the international markets and borrow from their Eurobonds and so on. And then our credit worth and our transparency comes in. The other source has always been our taxes, the political implications. And that's why we keep on coming back to my original word. We need political boldness.
Yes.
You know, the domestic debt will always be there. There are no two ways about it. Because the bulk of the domestic debt is always money that is borrowed in advance of the revenue collections by governments. So through treasury bills and so forth, treasury bonds and so forth. That's the bulk of it. And so it will always be there because you're planning a budget for this year. Revenues will come, over a period of time, depending on some seasonal, sometimes whatever. But you need to spend. You need to. So that they borrow always. And this is one of the main things. And I remember when government has always said that it's better to have long-term bonds. Because the cost is cheaper than short-term, 90 days, 180 days treasury bills, which are a bit more expensive. But these are the kind of things that they borrow. In addition, sometimes they also have infrastructure bonds and so forth, money that require urgently to do some infrastructure and so forth. The government has issued those kind of bonds, but it's largely those kind of facilities. So it always be there. The only thing is now when your revenue shortfall is there, you don't carry it, doesn't meet the target. And then government has to borrow. Each year, the amount keeps on increasing because of the budget deficit. And because the government also wants to always shies away from the external because of the
conditionalities,
the risks and the conditionalities and so forth. So this one is easy. There are no conditions, and you just need to borrow based on, and it's bonds that you issue. And banks, like you said, it's good money. So any bank, and by the way, it's better now. When these guys came to power, you remember the yield on the treasury bonds had gone to almost 16, 17, 18%. So all the banks were putting the money into these treasury instruments because they were making crazy money out of that. But I think eventually now these things have been addressed when inflation was reduced and so forth, and now I think is the single-digit figure. But still, government will continue borrowing domestic because of, I think, the shortfall on the revenue that they have, and this will be there for a while. But I agree with him, it does affect the private sector because when you compare, when you're walking and the government walks in, I would rather give to the government. Exactly. There's no risk of default.
So then the question is, the debt question formed a very big position when it came to campaigns 2022, and that was the basis upon which then Deputy President, today President William Ruto, focused on that we need to stop borrowing more for us to have an economy that is working. But we look at the situation and, like many would say, kwa ground, mambo ni different, right? So here's a question. By the time individuals are coming together to say the debt question is important, we need to sit down together, opposition, a broad-based government come in place, 10-point agenda, we need to address the debt question. One asked the question, Prof, was it a political gimmick? Was it just a way of making Kenyans not go to the streets? Or did they sit and mean each and every single word in terms of addressing the debt question? And how would you rate the performance over this debt question that we are talking about today?
If you look at 2022 polls, one of the things that I found very good about it is for the first time, economy was a big issue.
Yes.
And I hope even in 2027 it will be a big issue. From where I sit, I'm convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that when these people talked about debt, they knew the truth. But it was something emotional, something that was touchy. That's why they discussed it. But they knew that they not be able to solve that problem even when they get to power. And most of the people who are talking about debt, including the president himself, have been in the government for a long time. So I think they knew the truth. But in terms of campaigning, in terms of making it a campaign issue, it was very powerful. Because everybody was talking about we have overborrowed, we have so much money from China. So it was a very good political campaign. But the reality on the ground is very different. Now, when we talk about me ranking or their performance, I think they have continued piling debt like any other regime. I don't think they have performed any better. Maybe they have made better promises. But when it comes to the reality on the ground, I don't think they have done any better when it comes to the performance in terms of debt. Unless somebody has, in the university we have the concept of external examination. So I mark a paper, then we have an external examiner. So the two of them can be external examiners, and they can give their ranking or their rating.
Okay. A little different, perhaps, perspectives. I think when they were campaigning, if you look at their manifesto and so forth, I think there were ways in which people thought that they were going to address that issue. One of them, I think, was that they were going to raise taxes and they would stop the borrowing. This, I think, the president repeated so much in the first year. It was his main campaign, after coming in. And I remember him saying, anybody with a phone over 18, I'll leave a tax. And that he was saying that I want 6 trillion. The revenue to go to 6 trillion and so forth. And so there was a lot of a plan for them. And so, but when 2024, now they did put that into action, the backlash was very harsh from Kenyans that no, we don't want. And so I think their plan then collapsed to try and stop the debt and fund our own things through taxes. The second, I think, is there are other innovative ways in which I think they're trying to raise money to address development challenges, which I think personally I found them very good. One of them is these things about the sovereign wealth fund, infrastructure fund. I actually find those things very positive, very innovative ways of, because they've always had, since the time of NAC, we have always had this law about PPP, public-private partnership, which allows the government to leave the loans and get the private sector and partner with them and do some of the things. That law has been there, but we did not maximize on really that or utilization of that area. One of them is this highway, this expressway, to the airport. I mean, it's benefiting a lot of people. But the government was not supposed to, although whatever might have happened, but the government is not supposed to have put in their own money. This is a private, public-private partnership. So this is the same thing that I think they wanted to do with Adani and the airport. And many of the things that they're trying to do, the road on Mahi Road and so forth and so forth. So I think the thing is, again, they are facing headwinds even in that one, because issues you raised about public participation and people will go to court and this is not right and who are those people and the other deals that happen, the transparency issues on these deals and so many questions. So it's not very easy. And I really sympathize with whoever wants to come to power in 2027, because whichever way you go, there'll be challenges. You want to go this way, you'll be told, no, these are not very transparent ways of doing things. I want to borrow, it's a challenge. You want to raise taxes, it's a challenge. So we have a bit of a situation. But so I think if they pursue these other alternative ways of raising, of getting some of these major deals done, projects done, then I think it's if they are necessary, by the way, if they are necessary. You remember when Uhuru was doing the SGR, he was told this SGR is the train to nowhere. We don't need it. And I remember Indy and some of the members saying that we don't need this huge infrastructure problem because the return, the value is not really not clear. Yeah. But now the same government, the same guys are now working on extending it to Malaba and Kisumu and those areas. So it's about sometimes the priorities. Yeah, it's not always about the need for development, but it's the priorities. I was reading about NSF last week, saying they want to put up the tallest building in Kenya, or is it in Africa? They want to put up. And I said, what? For what? Why would they want to do that when there's a glut in the office space in Nairobi? Everybody can, that information is available. There's so much buildings that have been put up in Upper Hill are empty, exclusive offices. So I mean, the
IEBC also wants a building, Uchaguzi House. So while we're at it, everybody wants a building to develop one, and I don't know if the bill is in the billions in terms of this. So I guess that then feeds into the question that the resources that are available, we tend to think of resources as just hard cash or mineral resources, but it seems as though there is a lot in terms of resources that are available that then can be deployed by government. And we keep coming back to government because you are the vanguard. Government is the vanguard of the resources of the country at the moment. And whoever is in those positions is supposed to do that. So when you combine the lack of prioritization with the resources available, Prof, does Kenya need to borrow?
That's to me, that is the most important question this morning. I don't think Kenya, in my opinion, needs to borrow, but prudently. Let me explain. I think the president, when he said that we should all pay taxes, meant very well. And I always dream for the day when we shall stop borrowing, because it's not very prestigious to keep on borrowing, going to the west, east, and so on, borrowing money. But the biggest problem is if we have to stop borrowing, then we have to get an alternative source of revenue, which is taxes. And Kenyans, I've never heard, even when Kenyans were demonstrating on the streets of Nairobi, saying they don't want to pay taxes. All they want is to see where their taxes are going. In fact, if Kenyans see where their taxes are going, they can even say the government, we are even giving you a bonus tax. So if we show where the tax is going, then Kenyans will be more than willing. When Kibaki came to power, I think the tax revenues went up substantially. He didn't do anything very, very big. I think people just started seeing where their taxes were going, and they were more than willing to do that. So I think Kenya needs to borrow, but prudently, because in the short run, taxes will not cover all our developmental costs. So we need to borrow and put that money into the right use. And if you go to other countries in the world, even the US, they have the highway system and so on, people borrowed money. But the question is what we do with that money. Now, something else that I probably should mention a bit very briefly is the ingenious way that the government is trying to raise money is using levies instead of taxes. Because the levies are a bit more politically friendly, housing levy and so on. But the other big question is, I agree with you, we need to go to PPP. One of the P's we know it is public, but I'm very suspicious about the private part of it. It needs to be more transparent. But we know it is public, private sector. We know who that private is. And that will make a very big difference. Finally, you asked whether we should borrow. I think we can even avoid borrowing in the wrong land because there is a lot of money in this country. What we need to run is how to mobilize it. And I'll give you two examples. Some time ago, Kenya breweries wanted to raise some money. I think they wanted to raise 11.5 billion using a board. It was oversubscribed by, I think, to 37.5 billion. Safaricom board was also oversubscribed. So clearly there's a lot of money in this country. The question is how do you mobilize it? Something like Expressway was 88 billion. That's very true money. So if we can make Kenyans, if we can give Kenyans freedom and innovativeness so that Iraki and my two friends, we can come together and say we want to build the expressway from Nairobi to Thika. And we come up with a special purpose vehicle, and you become shareholders, and Kenyans become shareholders. We are going to build that road. But we have been made to believe that money must be borrowed from other people to build infrastructure. Why can't we do it ourselves? If you are building a road, you just need concrete. You just need cement, which is around. So why don't we give that Kenya that freedom to also fund the economic development, the infrastructure, and so on. So in a nutshell, it's possible to stop borrowing in the wrong land. In fact, I long for the day when we are going to start lending money to other people so that we also make money from interest rates, like IMF and others.
I mean, I look at it from the perspective that, like Prof, you've said, it's true that Kenyans have no problem in paying taxes. Kenyans want to see how that tax is being spent. And if you remember, in 2024, the reason why Kenyans were on the street is, but we're seeing the wastage that is happening. You can't tax us more and continue misappropriating these funds. But then again, even when we talk about going out there to borrow, President Uhuru Kenyatta will give out the contracts. Kipchumba Murkomen gets in, we will give out the contracts. And these contracts are never ever given to Kenyans. Yet, Kenyans have the right to information. That is the Constitution. So then, below, one asks the question, the government's failure in communicating exactly why they're borrowing and what they're borrowing, as well as giving this information for Kenyans to consume and to decipher and participate in these processes, is why Kenyans today are not trusting that the government is borrowing and using these monies for what is intended for.
Well, I think in many countries, even some of the developed countries, this trust deficit is always there.
Yeah.
Even in the US, they always hear nowadays a lot of complaints about how their money is being spent. The government is financing Israeli government to do this, and the government is sending money here. There are people who are homeless. There are people who have medical problems, and these challenges you'll find them always in many countries. And there are others who do it very well in some of the Scandinavian countries, and where people seem to be comfortable with the way their money is being spent. But I've told you that there are a lot of reasons why government does not want to always. One, the political expediency, I think Prof has explained, which is always an overriding factor. And second, of course, is you want to do these things that the previous guys have done also, so that you can also continue without getting stuck and so forth. And then thirdly, there's always an opposition to many of the things you do. No one likes government all over the world. When you're in power, you'll always have people who are challenging you in court, people challenging you in opposition. Never mind the goodwill you have, even if it is through a goodwill and you want to do something, but people always will challenge it for political expediency by the other side. And so sometimes then you find the government resists the attempt to try and put this thing out in a transparent way, because they know they will be challenged, and they will, so they feel like let them just do the work, and they can take the flak later, whatever happens. And this is this has happened from the time of Moi up to now. So, but I think frankly the issues that my Prof has explained very well. We do not need to borrow heavily the way we are doing in this country, if we really decide to. One, how to spend our money. We spend, prudently, like they have been. If you go to Ethiopia, a shilling has the value of a shilling to the government. If this bottle is 100 shillings, government will also buy it for 100 shillings. It's not like in Kenya, if you sell it to the government, it's 1,000 shillings. If I'm buying, it's only 100 shillings.
Yeah.
This is something that Kenyans have resisted, and you've seen it when recently the government tried to introduce, from the time of Uhuru, the e-procurement. And one of the reasons why every government institution has been, trying to reject that is because then it would try and address that issue in the manner that I have said. It will be shilling for value for money that the government will get in terms of. So I think we don't really need to borrow. Lastly, I want to mention about the capital markets. We are one of the most developed capital markets in the country, where you can actually raise money, and that was the reason why. So that the reason why we spend a lot of time to deepen this market and provide all those tools, so that the government can have actual access to funds that are there. So when we have a state corporation, say a sugar company, there's no reason why government should be pumping money. If the government privatized and sold that thing, put it on the stock, people will finance it. And government then would reduce the expenditure on that state corporation. That's why we have the capital markets. So that government needs to get out of some of these things, and the resources are available very easily for this kind of thing. I look at this road from Mombasa to Nairobi, when the Americans were to do, I think, a couple of years from the time of Uhuru now. One of the things that company wanted to do is not to come with money from America. They wanted to raise money in our capital markets here, and then do the road. Which is something which we can do. But I keep repeating this thing, that one of the challenges you have in this country is, although because of the high level of corruption in the country, there's a huge suspicion about everything the government does.
Absolutely.
So that even if it's goodwill, you'll always face headwinds. That is a challenge.
One of those institutions, Senator, that is tasked with public debt management is Parliament. And for obvious reasons, of course, scrutiny issues concerning loan approvals, and ultimately even legislation. And locally we say that Kenya's parliament is captured by the executive, and you have been a member of one of those houses. What is this thing that we really have to do to save Kenyans from this capture, and particularly insofar as enhancing the role of Parliament in oversight of our debt? I know it's quite a tough question, but From your experience as a parliamentarian?
We have come very close to. When in 2024, in the tax thing, you remember, when people went to parliament?
Yes, June 24th.
That was the closest, and that Kenyans held the members of parliament to account, where every member of parliament had to go publicly and apologize that I voted for that bill.
Yeah.
I should never have done it. Can I be spared? It doesn't have to get to that, that level with violence and all that. But I think the parliament is a political house, and because of the way our politics is high stakes, really, you can't compare with any of the countries in the region. And because of that, members of parliament then would be very difficult to deal with, because then the party that is in power has to really rally their team to get their policies approved in parliament. That because of the high stakes politics. In countries where politics is not so much vibrant in many of these countries around in Africa and so forth, then members of parliament would then be in a position to say no. But I think in the last 20-30 years, I think the political parties have had a very significant say over members of parliament, and because of that, then members of parliament must draw the line. In terms of what they do. You can't be whipped if you don't do this and that. But that independence that we used to have when there was a backbench, you had to scrutinize. Those things were there before 2002, and you could. But now I think it's not easy. And then second thing is that members of parliament, their roles also changed from being an oversight to being some sort of an executive. They are building roads. They have CDF building offices and hospitals and things. Yes. So every day you are in office looking for money for CDFs, and you want your CDF money, you want money for roads, you want money for this, for that. You don't want to be on the wrong side of the government, because you will not. So, and I have an example. When in 2003, this was even the good old days. It's not even now. And I wanted electricity in one of my towns in my constituency. And so I went to see the CS, and I told him, I need electricity installed in my town. And he told me, no, but you are in opposition and you're always criticizing us, the government. You're always criticizing parliament. So how can we give you electricity? We want to prioritize with our supporters.
So stop doing your job, and then we can give you electricity.
I told him, my friend, that's not what the law is. The law is the development is an entitlement of everyone. So I'm going to take this matter up if you're not going to do it. But luckily the PS was there, and he told me, forget about all the CSAs. I'm going to do it because you're entitled to those things, and he did it.
Indeed.
But I think those are some of the challenges that members of parliament always have to
deal with.
Yeah.
I want us to take a break. We're going to go into the news and come back and then see how we can wrap up this conversation, because I think it's necessary for us to be pointed in the right direction. Let's do that and come back for another 10 minutes or so, and then we can continue with this Good Morning 9 a.m.
My name is Cynthia. I'm 22 years old. I have been sewing for 2 to 3 years. I enjoy it. I can sit here the whole day doing it, especially kids' clothes.
Before moving to Nairobi, she grew up in a rural part of Kenya.
My mother is a farmer. I used to sell bananas, and the education there was not that good. Because of health challenges, I could not perform at my best level.
Bad living conditions eventually caused her to contract typhoid-like symptoms. But then she was invited to a ministry supported by Orphans Promise called Our Home. Here, children are given everything they need to thrive, including a quality education and resources for their future success. Cynthia recovered from her illness and excelled in her studies.
I had a dream that one day I'll go to Nairobi. When the opportunity came, I knew that my dream was coming true. Staying at our home was a very good impact. I learned to be responsible at our home. Mom Ruth really instilled responsibility in us. For the first time I saw her, I just told myself, this is a mom. I got to know God on a deeper level. Every Sunday, we would go to church, and then we came back home and did devotions. We were asked to speak up in front of people, and that gave me a lot of courage.
She also learned that God gave her the gift of sewing. We paid for her college courses in design and tailoring. Now, as a seamstress, she makes enough to rent an apartment and help others. She regularly visits the children at our home and uses her skills to make clothes for them.
So, Cynthia, I have been in children's homes before, but these children are so happy and they're dressed so beautifully. I'm stunned to learn that you made all of those clothes. You studied this.
In school, we were taught to use patterns. But as you go outside there and work with people, you just learn to use free hand. What really helped me to become as good as I am is my teacher back in college. She really encouraged me. And the advantage I had was the children here at our home. I felt so good when I saw them wearing what I had created. In class, when people would want to make clothes for children, they would call me because I was like an expert.
What does that make you feel? Obviously, there's a creative gene in you that's amazing.
Actually, I always feel very, very blessed. My biggest happiness is the kids. I love seeing them smart. That's my vision, to always make them smart.
I can tell they know they look good.
Yeah, they are always happy.
That's because of you. Yes. Wow, what a wonderful gift.
Actually, what motivated me the most, when you grow up at our home, you see people blessing you, you keep having blessings.
You're receiving all
receive.
the time, yes.
And we also learn to give.
I love that.
Yes, we give, and I chose to give to our home.
Do you like your dresses?
Cynthia has a gift. She could take that gift and run with it. Cynthia's here giving back to the place that gave to her. She's only 22 and she knows the value of that. Don't have to say more.
I want to say a big thank you to Orphans Promise for the support I received, because getting that kind of support is rare. I thank God I came. It's by God's grace. I pray that one day I can also have the same kind of heart that you have of supporting orphans and vulnerable children.
Kevin was born at his grandmother's house. After his mother gave birth to him, she abandoned him, leaving him in the care of his grandmother.
When I was small, life at home with my grandmother was very good. I love her very much. I woke up, went to school, and then came back home. Granny gave me chores to do with her, and when I was done, she let me play.
A few years later, Kevin's mother came back, planning to take him with her to Nairobi. Kevin's grandmother didn't want him to leave, but she had no choice but to let him go. Instead of taking him to Nairobi with her, his mother abandoned him again, this time with an aunt in the nearby town of Kitale.
I did not like being there or being away from home. My aunt would not give me food. She sent me to bed hungry while they ate. She was angry at my mom for not sending her money to support me. I spent 1 whole year there. Then she chased me away and threw my bag out of the house. That night, I just sat by the road. I could not go to sleep because I had to guard my bag from street boys who wanted to steal from me. I did not know how to get back to my grandmother, and I felt like I had nothing to live for. I thought of looking for a rope and hanging myself.
The next day, someone found him on the streets of Kitale and brought him to Embrace, a ministry supported in part by CBN's Orphans Promise. Here, he was given food, counseling, and a safe shelter. Here, he could heal from his trauma while social workers searched for his grandmother.
Everyone welcomed me here at Embrace. We did many different activities and always had fun together. One of the things I learned to do is pray, and now I pray every day. I was taught about God and the Bible, and I gave my life to Jesus. It felt so good, and immediately my life became different.
Just a few months after he arrived at Embrace, Kevin was reunited with his grandmother.
I was so happy to get back home with my granny. It was a very happy day. My grandmother said she prayed every day that God would bring me back to her. I really missed her and she missed me. I'm back in my old school now. I'm working hard to catch up. I'm very grateful to everyone who helped me. I've come a long way to be here today, and I never want to go back. If it weren't for you, I would not be here. Now I have a hope for a good future. I pray God will bless you all and that you continue helping rescue boys from the streets and teaching them about Jesus.
Farming should not be boring. It is very interesting, especially if you do something that you love. And beekeeping is one of the most interesting things you can do. And it is very, very lucrative. Here we have 100 beehives, right? But you'll see some of them we have spread on the trees, but the ones which are ready, we have put them on the structure. One of the main raw materials is actually water. So bee needs to drink water so that they can help produce honey, right? They mix with their substance, whatever they do, the magic there, then they produce the honey.
Panadol Extra provides 3 times more pain-relieving power than standard paracetamol for fast relief from strong pain like headache, toothache, and muscle pain, and can get to work in 10 minutes so that I am ready to be there for those who need me. Stronger pain relief at only 20 shillings per pair.
My name is Immaculate Kasait, Data Commissioner. Catch me on Trading Bell as we discuss issues around data protection, progress we have made, the recent conference we had in Mombasa, key highlights, and what the future looks like for data protection in this country. See you then.
Nimeona uaminifu wako, nimeona huruma zako, jina la Yesu libarikiwe. Nimeona nguvu zako, nimeona uaminifu wako, nimeona huruma zako.
Dial star 811 star 917 hash to get this as you skiz a tune. KTN, your home.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Obvious what the answer is by now, but can we see development projects commensurate to the amount of money that Kenya owes, 12 trillion shillings? You would be able to see developments in the country for 12, even if you're paying it back, you would be able to see that kind of money. Borrowing more money is supposed to be, it's a slapstick solution for a problem that we are not dealing with, which is corruption. Would we deal with with corruption better by stopping the borrowing and then looking at the problems that have been created? Prof, you laugh. Maybe we can start with you.
That's a very interesting solution. You stop borrowing so that resolve the problem. I don't think that will happen.
No.
What I believe we should do are a few things. One of them is we need to make our opposition more vibrant. Because if there's no opposition, then the government probably do a lot of things and get away with it. We have seen the last maybe 10 years, opposition being eroded. But the best way to deal with that is to make the voters more active in the political sense. Because what we do is after we vote people in, we wait until 2027 or the other voting pattern or voting time. But if the voters were more vigilant, they are always watching their MPs, their MCAs, their senators, their women rep. They'll probably be more accountable. There'll be less corruption. But very important, I think we need to change our value system so that trust is always a problem in this country. And he kept on, Bill kept on talking about it. I'll talk about it. Trust is a big problem. I'll give you 2 examples. One, and that corruption is about trust. Who can you trust? For example, you found IPO for Kenya Pipeline being subscribed, and people asking why are people not buying those in IPO? But some of us bought Mumias, they bought KQ, and you know what happened. So people are saying maybe the same will happen. Trust again. And the final example why trust is so important in debt, in business, is an example I had last week. I spent 1 week in Germany. I'm not boasting, I'm just informing you. But and when I got there, I got a ticket. a bus ticket. This ticket, you can use it on the bus, on the underground train, and in a ferry. For 1 week, I traveled around the city of Hamburg wherever I wanted. Nobody asked me for the ticket. Nobody.
Yeah.
That's the trust we are looking for.
Because they knew that if you got on the thing, that you had a ticket, then it wouldn't be crazy to get on it without
pay.
Right.
So when you become an MP, when you become a leader in this country, can we trust you that you use our money prudently?
Yeah.
But the problem is a lot of people, once you get to those positions, your work is to see how much can you misuse that money. How much of that money can you misuse, or can you divert? So if we build trust in this country, I don't know whether it is through the churches, through our families, through judicial system, but trust is the first step in making sure that we prudently make use of our debt.
Bilo?
There's one of those African proverbs, I don't know which country, which says, one does not, I like it so much because it says, one does not refuse to eat for fear of choking. We can't like it says, stop borrowing because of fear that it will be stolen, or because of the corruption. But I think I've always argued that one of the challenges in corruption, because it's permissive, it's across the entire society, is society has changed a lot. Just an example of this one that he has told you in Hamburg. If you were in Nairobi in 1970s and you took a Kenya bus service, and I was here, I took it in 70s, the conductor would simply ask you have a ticket? Yes. Then you'll just give the person who says, I don't have a ticket. So that then, when you're getting down to the next stage, when you're getting out, there's an inspector who would then probably show. But it was also on random basis sometimes. Later on it became. But so as society became more and more untrustworthy, as you will maybe use that word, then some of those checks and all of it came in, that you must show your ticket and all that. But I think there is a sense in which society itself is partly responsible for this. That when you get into government, you have to do that. There was a time when you could walk into a car showroom in Nairobi in those days, and you could test drive a car. No, we'll give you a car now to test drive. It will be very difficult. So part of the problem is society, but I think the government has the responsibility. That's why they're elected, to deal with corruption. You cannot have a situation where for the last 30, 40 years we've been told that 30% of our government expenditure is stolen. This has been repeated by NAC government particularly. I remember Joseph Quinyo mentioned it. Nyang when he was the Minister for Economic Planning, they opened, and then ever since Uhuru repeated it. So it's clear that we're losing a third of our money. And then what action is being taken? Look, the borrowing. Let me give you an example. Last week there was a court ruling which gave 154 million to the judges whom Uhuru refused to swear. So government officers, state officers from the president down, if they are responsible for some of those expenses, the law says they should be surcharged.
Personal responsibility.
It doesn't happen. So you borrow, you sign a contract for a loan, I pay commitment fees of 4 billion, 5 billion, nothing happens. The Greenfield thing, the airport, the terminal, second terminal, in Kibaki, they paid 4 billion, over 4 billion to Chinese. Nothing happens. So there are no consequences. And the law yet is, if you look at Public Finance Management Act, there are over 37 different areas for which you can be held responsible and charged in court. But it hardly happens.
Unfortunately.
I was just wondering, and I wanted to ask our speakers this morning, during the Gen Z protests, there was a rallying call for a pay bill. Give us a pay bill. Let's contribute. And over time, particularly when you look at the kind of corruption, the wastage that is accustomed in our spending, people sometimes feel like they have a responsibility to do something. Of course, we saw it happening in 2024, where Parliament was overrun, the President withdrew his finance bill, etc. But looking at sustainability, because we are seemingly saying we cannot not borrow. So we have to borrow, but do it prudently. Could there be a mechanism to establish a voluntary, say, debt contribution fund for citizens? who are interested in helping their country to salvage. Is it something that is possible?
Who should answer that question?
You.
By the way,
the both of you.
Koreans did that sometimes. People donated gold and other things to clear the national debt. But they did that because they felt a sense of national pride, a sense of patriotism. And they knew, what happened after that. Again, it trust. Today, if we contributed that money, how can we be sure it will be put into the good use? It might disappear into people's pockets. And that's why trust is so important. I remember again going to another country where I was supposed to get an insurance cover. And if you are married, you get a very good cover. They asked me, are you married? I said yes. Nobody asked me for marriage certificate. But if you cause an accident later on, now when they will get you. So I don't know what we are supposed to do from the depth of my heart to make people more trustworthy. So that whether you are a reader, whether you are a servant, whatever you are doing you can be trusted. I think that is a trust deficit that we are suffering from. And it's very costly to the economy. Because you have to hire people. If you're a businessman, called inspectors, people truck around, people idling around to watch over other people. That makes the cost of business very expensive.
Indeed.
But I believe if we are patient, if we get board readers, we can change these things down. We can change these things in our lifetime.
Comes back to Kenya in terms of the leaders that you choose to put some of these things into reality. We've had a conversation this morning. One of the points of the agenda, of the 10-point agenda, which comes to a head perhaps by Friday this week, is to reduce public debt. And what it's going towards is necessary for us to look into. The decisions that you make today could affect what will happen tomorrow. Not could, they definitely will. Professor X and Iraki, thank you for joining us this morning. Bill O'Carroll, thank you for being here today to lead us in this conversation. We look forward to then being able to open up insights into the future. Asante Sana.
Thank you.
And from this point, we're going to our next conversation for the hour, and we're going to visit a conversation that we had a couple of days ago with Leonard Mark, who is the CEO of Zepes, and we'll be looking into beyond remittance, a smarter way to move and manage money. Join us in this conversation as we go into it. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.